You mich? Not yet. Hello, hello. Hello. Does it work? Now you hear me, yeah? Perfect. Hey, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you tonight here. Let's see a very short sign of hand. Who is here from the University of St. Gallen? Student, alumni, partner, some relations to HSG. I cannot really see you. You have to raise it higher. Higher. This is half. This is half. So I should raise my hand. I'm Christoph Birkholz, and I'm super glad to be back here in St. Gallen at HSG. I did my PhD, and I was a bit shocked to see I finished that already 10 years ago. So I don't pity myself for getting older, but 10 years since finishing the PhD was a bit shocking. Really cool to be back here to get the entrepreneurship vibe, the investment vibe. Of course, I've been following a lot what's happening in the east of Switzerland, now being based in Zurich much more. And I'm moderating this evening here. By the way, we started a bit late because we wanted to allow the people on the trains from Zurich that had some kind of train problems to still come here. I see some nodding heads, so maybe there will be some more lost on the train, or you can follow us on the live stream. So whoever is following on live, also big welcome to you on your screens. So tonight, the AI talk here of the Swiss AI Weeks. I'm really happy that this turned out as it did. I could share the whole evening telling the story of how the Swiss AI Weeks came about, but we really want to focus on resilience, investment in startups, in deep tech and AI tonight. And normally, I would start with a big round of thank yous at the end, but I want to do it now at the beginning, taking a bit of a risk. I don't know what the panelists and speakers will say. I'm still going to do a bit of a round of thank yous. A big thank you to our team here, Sabine, Jörg, Katka, Max from Swisscom, Andreas, who helped a lot, all the panelists and speakers, the Start Global team, who is really working behind the scenes, or have been working behind the scenes for this event, and all the partners who made it possible. So let's give a big round of applause for everyone, because there's always a lot of work behind it. And it truly needs a village to raise the Swiss AI Weeks, or an event of tonight. We are part of the AI Weeks. That's 5 weeks now of over 4,000 registrations, 250 events happening all over Switzerland, really from Geneva to St. Gallen, from Basel to Lugano. So let's make sure that tonight we stand out, right? In 250 events, that might not be so easy. There are big hackathons last week also here in St. Gallen happening, but let's stand out with a very relevant and important topic on resilience. How do we stay resilient in Switzerland, as Switzerland, when it comes to our innovative capacity, our economic capacity, our role to play, as there's this massive technological shift that we've all been witnessing or being part of in the last 2.5 years, and some of us for 10, 15 years in this development in AI, and what it means for us in Switzerland. So we will dig into it. What should we do? What do we see? And we have a tremendous lineup here. I mean, all of you didn't come from me, but for the people who will be sharing their knowledge, their experience, and their thoughts on stage. And with that, I would like to start with the very first speaker. He is someone in particular here in St. Gallen should be known. I don't need to introduce him, actually. So Adi Locher, he has been a founder of DynDeal, so one of the very early pioneers of internet startups coming here out of Switzerland. By now a friend. We've kind of followed each other over the years. Since then, you've also invested and worked in AI before ChatGPT, before OpenAI came out, and I think you are somebody who really takes bets, who sees the future and who acts on it, and that we would like to hear tonight. So a big round of applause. Let's give him really a very warm welcome here back on stage in St. Gallen. Adi Locher.
So hello everyone, and indeed it's sort of like coming home for me. So I graduated here more than 10 years ago, so I'm not going to count the years now, but it's quite a while ago. I've been ever since deeply involved in St. Gallen, so I was on the board of the St. Gallen alumni, and nowadays also serve on the board of trustees of the HSG Foundation. That's the endowment behind the uni, and also one of the reasons why this building here is actually existing, because it was mainly donated by alumni. And I'm also supporting START, who probably all of you know, with the big campus and the big summit happening every year. Not going to talk about that tonight, but I'm going to talk about AI investments, right? And I'm actually going to talk about something that investors usually don't like to. I'm also going to talk about the stuff that doesn't work. You know, so I'm not just going to take you on a ride of success stories, but I'm also going to tell you what actually didn't work so well. So I'm going to talk about 10 years of investing in AI. That sounds like a lot. I think it happened in a blip. But yes, indeed, we started investing in AI companies 2016, which is way before AI was cool. Well, I always thought it's cool, but I think the world started to take notice in 2022 when ChatGPT came around. Not going to talk about a lot myself, but maybe just what led me here. Started a couple companies. Some of them were successful, others not. Gave me some freedom to start new things. At some point, I realized I'm a builder. I like investing, but I'm a builder, so I started to build Merantix, which today has turned into a group of initiatives that I will talk about later on. But let's talk about AI first, and what the public perception of AI is. And I think there is pretty much two camps. One is the boomers, and the other one is the doomers. And the doomers are quite a significant camp. And they raise a lot of questions, and I think a lot of also very pointy and interesting questions. Of course, as always, there's probably way too much weight on risks that we cannot even quantify today. But it's probably also the same when you look at the boomers, right? So they also have this blind optimism in things turning out well, when sometimes they just don't. In my eyes, and I'm going to be honest, I'm probably more part of the boomer camp, and I'm a tech optimist since I was born. The greatest risk is missing out on this wave. And that's also why I'm eternally grateful for Christoph and his whole team to actually raise the flag so high on this really, really important topic. In fact, I believe it's probably the most important technology of the 21st century. And it's going to change our society, the world we live in, as probably no technology has before. If you need an argument for that, look at this graph. The waves became bigger. The impact of these waves became bigger. Today, it's very, very hard to quantify the impact of AI. But what is sure, it is going to impact every single industry we can think of. Again, 5 years ago, when I talked about AI, 10 years ago, that was still news, right? So today, that's not news, especially not for the people sitting here. So I'm going to be quick. Talking about quick, the rapidness and the scale of how things move is quite eye-watering. If you think about Slack, which back in the days was one of the fastest growing companies on earth, well, now look at what's happening. Lovable made it to 100 million in no time. Cursor, I think the numbers are even old. I think they're now at 500 million within 2 years. One company in our portfolio, Libra, much smaller scale, but they made it from 0 to 3 million ARR in 8 months. Let's talk about where these waves come from and how they unfold. And I'm going to use the example of the internet, which most of us were witnessing in the very early days. In 2000, the world's most valuable tech companies were Intel, IBM, and Cisco, arguably the infrastructure companies of the internet era. One was building the chips, the other one was building the servers, and the third one was connecting these. When he took a spotlight 20 years later, surprise, surprise, it was no longer the infrastructure companies that mattered most and that were the most valuable, but all of a sudden it was the application companies. Why is that? Well, they built business models on these infrastructure companies that prior to the internet technologies wouldn't even be able to exist. Let's look at today. People talk about OpenAI, NVIDIA, the Europeans also about Mistral. These are very, very valuable, if not the most valuable companies, at least in OpenAI and NVIDIA terms. I think history is going to repeat itself. In 20 years from now, we are looking at companies that are the biggest, that probably don't even exist today. So let's talk about how to identify and find them a bit later. I just wanted to give you a very quick overview into our portfolio, not to brag, but to give you an idea how diverse AI applications can be. You'll find a company like Vara, they use AI for breast cancer screening. You'll find a company like Cambrium, they build novel types of biomaterials that only can exist because AI is designing the proteins. You find someone like Ovum Care who applies it in fertility. Deltia uses it on the shop floor where parts are assembled and how to optimize these processes. Then you have fintech companies, you have, you could say, fashion tech companies. You have someone like Droidrun, they built the agentic layer of Android phones. So, why do I do that? Because even today, when I talk to people about AI, majority of people still think AI is ChatGPT. Well, it's not. And in my eyes, frankly, it's also not going to be the most interesting application of AI. That's the 1% we see today. The real value, the real impact is going to be created in exactly those industries, which is also one of the reasons why I'm so bullish for Europe, right? Because right now, when you read the news and you read AI, then it's always the US companies that are talked about. Well, because they are the infrastructure companies, because it's so much easier to build and scale an infrastructure company in the US because you have a lot of people, you have a lot of capital. So companies grow much quicker there. But arguably, the interesting data layers, the interesting industry applications that we see are to a large extent exactly the types of industries that we Europeans are so good at. And we are actually better. If you think about healthcare, if you think about robotics, even if you think about finance, pharma, life science, a lot of the world's leading companies are actually European. And that is exactly where I think we should apply AI and where we should build the next generational companies. So, I promise you to talk about learnings and also stuff that doesn't work. I'm going to start with a bit of a poetic or funny one. One of the things most talked about in AI today is, or at least in the investor world, is moat. So what actually is the moat? If technology is moving so quickly, can technology be a moat? Well, most likely not, because what today is rocket science in 5 years is probably coming out of the wall, and everybody can use it. So what exactly is a moat? And what exactly is closer to snake oil? Well, let's look into that. Some harsh examples of companies that didn't make it because they were taken out by someone else or the technology underlying. And that is, of course, just a few examples that are very prominent. The graveyard of companies that attracted a lot of funding just then to not make it a couple of years later is very, very long. The reason behind is usually a bit of the same. Well, they started early, and then someone else used the same technology and was quicker, and then took the rest of the market out. And now, ask yourself the question, if you look at Lovable Cursor, amazing companies, they grew super quick. What's their moat, actually? And quite frankly, I have a few ideas, but I don't have a very clear answer to that, because today, Lovable does code as an output that I then use and build something with it. If another tool creates better code, well, I'm going to use the other tool. So how can I build a moat when I'm an AI company? Our thesis is it's about complexity and it's about integration into workflows. And I'm going to go a bit quick on this because it's a very complex slide, so it's a bit of brain overload. Bottom line is, we think the most interesting companies are the ones where you are deeply integrated in your customers' processes and therefore hard to replace. You create tremendous value in the application for your customer and you're deeply integrated in the workflows. So it's hard to take you out. There's a lot of examples. One of the old, today you could argue it's almost old economy examples, is Salesforce. Amazing company. By far not the best technology and by far not the best CRM that exists today. And yet still it's one of the operating systems in a lot of companies. And once you're in, it's hard to get out. Same is true for companies like SAP. These are companies that last. And they last because they are deeply integrated into customer workflows. Taking the example of Libra. Libra is a legal tech company that operates legal workflows. And in the very early days, Libra took a very distinct decision not to be a human augmentation, so not to make lawyers quicker and better, but to actually end-to-end automate workflows. So clients that use Libra are not just lawyers who get better, but it's lawyers who completely outsource whole tasks. It's corporate legal teams who completely outsource tasks. Very different take, and as you can imagine, also very different type of a business model that you're then gonna look at. Because you can do value-based pricing. You can price different workflows in a different way because they create different types of values. So from a company perspective, also very interesting because if you just sell seats, then people do whatever they want with these seats. And if they do high-value tasks, you still earn the same amount. With a value-based pricing, actually, you can take some of the value with. And that is what investors like. Another interesting view on is actually application or adoption, right? So as we know from human history, adoption speed is never the same as the availability of a technology. So technology is usually there much earlier on, but it takes people quite a while to change their habits, and companies even longer to change their processes. So it takes some time. How do you get people to believe in you very early on? Well, you want to find your first ideal customers that have such a high pain point that they're even willing to go along with a company that doesn't even exist. So a lot of the companies we build at Merantix through our studio are actually companies that have the first paying customers before they even have a product. With that, the market is validated. You have very high invest customers that also create and craft the product you're building, which is extremely important if you don't want to build something to then figure out, well, no one actually wants it. One of the biggest failure rates in companies is the ones who build behind closed curtains and then to realize, well, no one was waiting for my solution. Let's also talk about the founders themselves. You know, building an e-commerce company, which I also did. So I built a couple software companies and I also built an e-commerce company. That's the one many people know us or know me for. Well, that went really quick. We started, we had 30 million revenue in the third year, 100 million plus revenue after the fifth. And then we sold the company. Well, let me tell you, building an AI company takes a much, much longer horizon because you're playing a fundamentally different game. You always start in the very beginning where there's still quite a bit of tech risk, quite a bit of go-to-market risk, figuring out what are the ideal customers and also what are the customers you can grow the quickest with, right? Because as a founder, you always like to convince people to use your tool. Well, it turns out that probably 4 out of 5 customers you're talking to are not the ones that will help your company grow quickest. So you need to focus again on the cohorts of customers that you think can grow the quickest. Because in the end, it's not about building the comprehensive companies in the first 1 or 2 years. It's about building a company that, if all things go well, can go IPO maybe in 10 years from now. But the path there is a very rocky road, and you want to die in complexity too early on. So having a very, very laser focus on the first types of customers, the first value creation is crucial, and oftentimes a big reason for failure because people, after having raised money, start to scale their teams, start to invest in different areas, different strategies at the same time, and then they realize, oh, I can't manage it all, and die of the complexity. And then, of course, this thorny question that always haunts me when I think about my portfolio also is, will the company I'm investing in today still matter in 10 years from now? So let's talk about these founders, and I took the liberty to take a few very concrete examples of founders we have in our portfolio and to also talk a bit about how they are and how they work with us and why I think they're really great people, but also how I think we can support them best. So there's the academic, technical person, got out of university, probably has worked in an interesting field, has a couple of really breakthrough ideas, and then needs support in actually commercializing them, finding the right team. Then there is the corporate SKP here on the picture. We have Anouk. She's the founder of a fintech company that actually launches next week in a very techy, very infrastructure type space. Fun story because we started the company 12 months ago. In October, they will go live with $1 billion in transaction volume. So from 0 to $1 billion in transaction volume within 12 months. These people often have very deep domain expertise and they know exactly what is wrong with certain industries. And then again, they need help in identifying the right technical co-founders and identifying the first customers and go to market. We've got serial entrepreneur, people who have built companies before. Here on the picture is Felicia. She's actually also St. Gallen alum, who today builds Obum Care fertility clinic. She's built another company before. So for her, it was really interesting to get access to our technical teams and to our engineers to build the first prototypes of a fertility engine, while she wouldn't know exactly how to deal with investors and raise money, of course. Then the mafia entrepreneur on the picture, we have Julius, founder of, it's no longer called Company Shield, it's actually called Revelate, cybersecurity company. He's coming out of the Celonis mafia, and of their 20 people today, probably 16 people do have a Celonis background, which is a great asset, right? If you know exactly what you're hiring and who you're hiring, and you know about the culture and that works. Then there is the solo developer, the person that is really genius in their own room, working on something really crazy, but at the same time really needs access on the client side, on the go-to-market side. Also needs help with identifying the right type of co-founders, because they usually are not the most networky people. They probably are not found at events here tonight. So I'm ending with what I said in the beginning, the reason why we've built Merantix into this group that is today, because the firm belief I have is it's no longer about capital only. It's very easy to get access to capital if I'm building something cool and if I have a more or less impressive team. Getting access to investors is probably as easy as it never was in history. Instead, I think it's about having access to a massive, massive ecosystem, and that is what we started when we started to build Merantix. We've got one part of the group that is a solution provider, consulting firm, having a lot of access to industrial use cases, having a lot of access to clients. Actually, whenever I'm looking for access and trying to sell for one of my portfolio companies, I go through the Rolodex of Momentum and usually find a C-level that I can just call up and that already knows me or the brand and therefore has a lot of trust, which eases the wheels, which I think is very important, because in Europe what happens much less than it does in the US is actually large corporates working with startups, and we can bridge that trust. We've created probably the largest AI community in Europe by now, that is located in Berlin. It's our AI campus. It's home to 1,600 people working in machine learning. Last year they have hosted 300 events. We started to be present on the policy layer, organizing the AI House during the World Economic Forum. And obviously, that's what I mostly do. We have started to invest in an array of companies. So today, we're looking at a portfolio of 20 companies. Still very young, and I've seen many venture capital faces tonight with funds that are much, much longer on the road. And I'm eternally grateful for their support for the ecosystem, because in the end, and that's why this events and this series of events is so important, we cannot just talk about the ecosystem. We need to create it. And that's up to us here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adi. And I had so many thoughts also. Counterintuitive facts with like it needs 10 years, complexity as a mode. So I think really a lot of things to think about. We do the question that you have to, Adrian, in a way that we have breaks, right? We have a break in between the program and at the end, and you even stay in St. Gallen, so there can be a lot of questions until midnight here. Cool, wonderful. Actually, with this Swiss AI Weeks, we are also like, you founded Merantix together with Rasmus, who back then created Hack Zurich, the largest hackathon at that time in Europe, in Zurich, and we are sort of standing on his and their shoulders in all these hackathons happening here, so there are quite some relationships already. We will bring this now to Switzerland, to AI in Switzerland, to deep tech in Switzerland, of the last 2.5 years, of the next 12 to 18 months, and to the topic of resilience here. And I won't talk about it, I will rather ask some questions, and we have some wonderful panelists that I would like to ask on stage, all four, all at the same time, with the first big round of applause, and then we do another one afterwards. And I prepared these wonderful introductions for all of you and thoughts of fun facts, and I thought, okay, you don't want to hear me talk all the time, so we changed the program just before the talk. You give a very short introduction of who you are, and then we start with looking back over the last 2.5 years here in Switzerland in AI. Starting maybe just to my right with Mike Neff.
Okay, my name is Mike. My background is in computer science. I studied at ETH. I had a couple of focus points afterwards in education and information security, but I'm most well known for founding Doodle together with Paul, building that to profitability and eventual exit. Then I used that money to invest in startups. I've done 60 startup investments in software-driven startups in my time as an angel. And now I'm using all that experience and apply that to what we do at Übermorgen Ventures, where we invest in climate tech in the pre-seed and seed stages in Europe mostly, but also outside Europe as an exception.
And let me bring my fun facts. There's a lot of hidden relationships here. Funniest one is we live in the same building, and we found out 3-4 months after we had been living there already, like he walking home, and what are you doing here? I live there, me as well. True story. Next one, Victoria.
Hi everyone, it's very good to be here. My name is Victoria, I'm part of Swisscom Ventures. Swisscom Ventures is an early growth fund focusing on B2B companies that enable digital transformation. I'm focusing on mainly deep tech investments. That's a lot on the compute stack, basically. But we're moving more and more up, obviously, also in the kind of more up the stack into other AI middle layer and then applications.
And next one, Joanne Sieber.
Yeah, hello everyone, Joanne. I'm very happy to be here today as well. It also dates a little bit back. To be honest, my studies here at University of St. Gallen, so it's nice to be back. Currently, I serve as the CEO of Deep Tech Nation Switzerland Foundation, and I'm probably a bit of the odd one out here. For those who don't know, Deep Tech Nation Switzerland Foundation just yet, it has been established last year, actually in June. I'm a little bit more than, I would say, 1.5 years now in progress of building it up. And so it's also almost a little bit like a startup in itself. And I would say about the mission that we have here as a catalyst, as a non-profit organization, as a private initiative, very much backed by corporate and academic partners. I think we can talk later on a little bit more.
Absolutely, thank you. And we have Harald Nieder.
Thank you very much, delighted to be here. So I'm Harold, I'm one of the general partners at Red Alpine. I have a physics background, I have theoretical physics. I did this for quite a long time. I was at CERN during my PhD. I did a postdoc as well until I had enough of physics. And then I did a master in financial economics in Oxford, worked 7 years in London. Used the money I got from the bank to invest as an angel, and that was my route into venture capital eventually with Red Alpine. And in Red Alpine, we are investing sector agnostically, but deep tech and frontier tech, and with that, AI is a big part of what we're doing.
And before we start, you can think of questions already, because just before we go into the break, we hopefully have some times for questions as well. What you have here is one of the most active business angels in Switzerland, one of the largest portfolios that you've built. We have corporate venture capital experience, very technology-driven ecosystem building, and one of the first VC funds in Switzerland on the panel. So, take advantage of it as you think of your questions. Now, Adi shared their experience with the last 10 years in AI and Merantix, and we want to bring it now to Switzerland and what we've experienced in the last 2.5 years here, because I think all of us were in one way or the other astonished by the ChatGPT moment, even if you've been in machine learning or in natural language processing before or so. I think this was really a tremendous moment, at least for myself. What's your take on the last 2.5 years, Harald? You've just exited Lakera,
Yes.
portfolio company in AI.
Yes.
So congratulations on that. Maybe you can also share a little bit more on your portfolio there.
Yes, absolutely. It's actually a good example when we talk about resilience, because Lakera is a company that's actually building AI security. So AI security meaning that if you're having AI applications, if you're using an LLM, if you're using a chatbot or whatever, there are new risks that are emerging from that, and Lakera is securing that and is one of the leading companies securing that. And that actually leads me to the question, what happened over the last 2.5 years? I mean, we invested in Lakera slightly longer than 2 years ago, so it was at the onset of LLMs and generative AI, and we were set out really to build a new product category, things that haven't existed before. And I think that's one of the things that has happened over the past 2.5 years, is that there are just completely new opportunities, and Lakera and AI security was one of these things. I think from our perspective as an investor, a couple of things have changed, or new challenges have arisen. I think one of the things is about thinking, or kind of not remodeling, but rethinking how you invest. And I think one of the guiding principles that we looked at was really the technology stack that you have in AI. And if you think about the entire technology stack, literally from the energy that you need for driving AI up to the vertical, what Adam was talking about when you have the application layer. We actually looked at all these layers and looked at what are the things that we can invest in, and we placed a couple of investments actually across the whole stack. To be honest, with Lakera being an example for this mid layer. So we think about the energy, you think about the models, you think about the infrastructure, you think about a mid layer where the security happening. It's about model choice, it's about model optimization, it's about performance. And then on top of that, you have the application layer. And we had different approaches for the different layers where we placed our investments. And I think, I mean, we'll get probably into that, but I think from an investment perspective, some things have changed, some haven't, and I think that in particular when it comes to application layer, a lot of things are happening faster maybe and warrant a slightly different look, but the differentiation or what you need to succeed in is pretty old school, I would say. You still have to build a very good product, you have to have access, and that's how we look at it. Apart from what Adrian said in terms of integration into the workflow, it's also proprietary data, which we see as a big differentiator, and that typically you generate by having a great product, and the usage of the product induces proprietary data that you can differentiate yourself with. I think the other thing from an investment perspective, and then I'll stop for a minute, is going to be how the growth patterns have changed a little bit. I mean, we had these trajectories that companies are growing much faster. I think you have to take this with a grain of salt. It's all about the quality of the revenue eventually, and the jury is still out there with a lot of companies, I think. But it's also about the surefire indicator for success of a company used to be a pretty quick growth of employees. Now, in the age of AI, you have to rethink this a little bit, because there's a lot of efficiency generation. We saw that you can generate a lot of revenues with a very small number of employees. So things here and there that you have to adapt to from an investor point of view. But after all, it's super exciting times and lots of opportunities. And in particular, as Adrian said, in the areas where Europe is particularly strong. So this is what excites us.
And we spoke about the different tech layers in AI yesterday also in our call. You're looking, Victoria, at all 3 layers as well with Swisscom Ventures. And you're coming from a kind of stronger robotics application out of ABB Technology Ventures in the past. So how have you experienced the last 2.5 years? Now everything AI, and without AI not interested anymore? Or how was it for you these last 2.5 years?
I think we have to differentiate between basically kind of like the general technology development involvement and kind of the hype around AI versus what is really happening in industry and in the applications. We've already heard quite a bit about it. I think when we just look at the technology development, so how AI kind of came into the market, or how the market has changed in the last 2.5 years, I think what is very, very interesting is the speed with which it was adopted across any kind of like also end user. I think the distribution channels were there to adopt this technology. This is why we see this incredible speed. What we also see, it's an extremely fast-changing environment. Things change extremely fast. So model architectures and training strategies, tools and frameworks, they evolve so fast that tools, for example, that are relevant today are maybe not optimal for kind of applications in 12 months. So I think this is a bit the environment on one side. On the other side, you have very traditional industries that see the huge potential, but where obviously you need much deeper integration, you need a lot of domain expertise, so things are moving much slower. And I think I fully agree with what has been said already now. This is where the true value lies. This is also from a European or Swiss perspective where we can really shine, where we have the big differentiator, because we have the domain expertise, we have the talent that can also kind of build companies for solutions for these corporates, and we also have kind of the trust element that you need around it if you want to really work with within these environments. I'm fully convinced that some of the physical AI and robotics companies that are kind of augmented or driven by AI will come from Switzerland and Europe.
And before we jump into the future, and the question how we stay resilient, I would also like to hear your perspective on these last 2 years in AI. What has happened? I mean, you started with strong climate focus in a time where climate was on top of the agenda. And then came some geopolitical developments, some technological developments, and now sometimes you have to still kind of fight that CO2 reduction is still a topic, biodiversity loss is still a topic, and that this is still an investment case. How has AI and this ChatGPT moment changed your work with Übermorgen or your perspective on the market here in Switzerland?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I can say there. One is, it's really a wild ride. I think looking at what's happening in AI, what I notice is that AI gobbles up everything at the moment. So every VC is an AI VC currently. Every startup is an AI startup. There's many VCs who ignore anything that's not AI. It gobbles up all the attention. It gobbles up all the capital. It gobbles up all the electricity. I'm exaggerating, of course, but there's a lot of that going on, so it's a bit hard to prevail next to AI. But then, of course, it plays an important role for us at Übermorgen as well, both from an investment perspective. There's a number of angles where it's relevant for climate tech, whether that's process efficiency, optimizations, whether that's discovery of new materials and stuff like that, whether that's maybe discovering whole new avenues of tackling climate problems. Fundamentally, AI is, to a certain extent, yet another climate or emissions driver itself, so there's efficiencies in there as well. There's another angle where that's my personal one, where I started like 3 years ago developing tools for Übermorgen to use AI to make our lives a little bit easier there. So there's all kinds of angles and relevances for us at Übermorgen.
So you are an AI climate venture capital fund now? Or?
That would be a potential positioning, but we're not going down that road yet.
I wouldn't have thought so that with you involved. The idea for Deep Tech Nation, or the cause for Deep Tech Nation Switzerland, that came also before 2.5 years ago. There was much about how do we unlock pension fund capital, growth capital in investment, and still this must have changed these last 2.5 years in the way that you look at the ecosystem of Switzerland on what's lacking, and yeah, what's your take on it?
Mm-hmm. maybe firstly also in terms of developments, right? So I took a couple of facts and figures with me that we are observing, and I think it's wonderful to see this, right? So meanwhile, like since the last 2.5 years, we have 25% of new Swiss startups that are created here actually are AI related. A third of deep tech investments or fundings are actually going into AI first startups. We have the highest AI talent density in Switzerland. Then, of course, we have the big tech companies here, as everybody I'm sure knows. Then we heard earlier this year that Microsoft does a massive investment in infrastructure, etc. So when we from Deep Tech Nation Switzerland look at this development, so this is actually a very positive, a great signal, great observations. However, of course, our work is not just about AI. We look at it maybe a bit from a broader perspective in terms of verticals. But also, as you have mentioned, the mission of Deep Tech Nation is very much to make sure that Switzerland actually is becoming and is establishing itself as a leading deep tech nation. And the ingredients or even the outcomes that I've mentioned before, they're so vital, but they're not, to be taken for granted. I think you also said it before, Adi, right? Like it takes all of us, it takes the different actors to actually contribute and to push forward. Otherwise, we will for sure lose our competitive edge, not just in AI, but in deep tech in general.
There are some slight comments between the lines of what we have to do and where we get better. The general tone is still very optimistic and everything is great and exciting and amazing AI opportunities. So I'm an optimist as well on this. But maybe we can also look on the, let's say, the pitfalls here in Switzerland and where we lag behind. I mean, let's be honest, when it comes to the big model builders, we have nothing to say yet, right? We come with a fully transparent open source model, Apertus, that was launched 3 weeks ago. It's a start, certainly not the end of a big project out of ETH. But I would like to dig also a little bit in deeper, okay, where are we now? What do we need to do in Switzerland? What do we need to focus on in order to stay relevant and to find our niche in this big AI game? And I think that we heard a few things. Before we do that, let's do a first check here if there's any question from the audience, right? That might shift the agenda a little bit, but let's see if there's someone who has an urgent question he wants to ask now. That needs to be a brave one. I see one there, right? Is there a question in the back? Sorry, the lights are very good here in St. Gallen.
Yes. Hello. So last year I was working at VentureKick, and one of the things that was super clear for the startups was that if they wanted to expand and capture a bigger market, that they should move to the US eventually. But now with all of the political turmoil, now the HB1 visas, my question was, where do you think that the Swiss startups are trying to move now that maybe it's harder to get into the US?
Well, if you ask Swiss-based investors, I'm curious what the answer will be. Good question. Where to move?
I think, where to move? I mean, first, I think the important thing is to have this international perspective. And that's one of the biggest issues that we had. That for a lot of cases, Switzerland as a market is attractive, and then you're obviously the old story. And to be honest, for us, it's something that, I mean, geopolitics and visa issues aside, I think it's something that needs to be considered in earnest. I think it's super important, and again, I mean, Lakera is a good example. When we invested in it was pretty clear that the initial customers, and Dropbox was one of the first customers, were US-based customers. So you essentially have to have a presence there, and you have to be there. It's still a Swiss company, right? And the research is here, and so it's a setup that I think is one that we will see often. And I think it's super important that what we saw over the years is that that people or companies are moving to the US, as an example. It might not necessarily only be the US, but if it's an attractive market, you should really consider it. I mean, you should try to capture it, because we're in a situation where we have much more of a level playing field. I mean, we have some of the best products are coming from Europe and Switzerland. So, and if you have the best product, you will see that you succeed in the US, because the tech adoption is there and the people are eager to use the best product. So I think that's what we are encouraging our companies to do, to have a setup where you have a presence in the US, that you have a team in the US. And we see a lot of success with that, to be honest. And at the same time, doubling down on the strengths that you have really good research here, you got the technical talent here, and that combination is super fruitful, I have to say.
Still growth funding. Growth funding, when it comes to really big checks, is difficult from here, is it?
Yeah.
Well,
what do we do about it?
Well, I mean, you can come to us.
Maximum ticket size? I didn't do the research properly. Red Alpine, maximum ticket size now?
Oh, the maximum ticket size, we have, we can write up to, I mean, quite significant checks, to be honest. I mean, that depends on the case. But we have a couple of funds that cater also to the later stage. But it's a valid point. It's a double-edged sword in the sense that, you know, having, I mean, for us, it's an opportunity to invest in the later stage, because there is still a shortage of local capital. If you have a good company, you don't depend on the local money, right? You will get international money as well, which can also be an advantage. So that's not an argument that you have a shortage of local capital is not an argument why you shouldn't be successful. That's what I'm saying.
You can also come to us. We're obviously also, as mentioned, an early growth investor. I think capital follows opportunity, so it does not surprise me that international investors are super bullish also about Swiss and European companies, because this is a testament to the companies that are built here. We have really, really high quality founders, really high quality products. So I generally see this as a very good sign. And I'm convinced also with a maturing ecosystem, so with having strong players that have a very solid foundation, having a kind of like also founders that are exiting their companies, becoming kind of role models for other founders. So with all this maturing ecosystem, we will have much more capital available to invest in startups that is more local. I think when we sit here in 5 years, we will have a different view. That's my very bullish view on it. I think, again, capital follows opportunity, and we do have that. Yeah.
Well, that depends also on all the work that you are doing. You're investing beyond Switzerland, but Europe mainly, right? Or
mostly Europe.
Yeah. Mostly Europe, yeah. And of course, you are trying to build the ecosystem and get the pension funds investing into growth.
Yeah, that's the intention, of course. Yeah, we still see there a massive gap, and of course at the same time a massive opportunity, right, for institutional investors like pension funds to get far more involved in the Swiss, you could say, development story. And I wouldn't disagree with you. I totally understand for a successful company. I don't think it's the condition to say, okay, it needs to be local capital or growth capital in that sense, and otherwise it's not going to work out. And maybe also to your question in terms of, okay, US market or EU market, go for it as a recommendation by VentureKick. I also think this is the right mindset, absolutely the right mindset. I think Switzerland as a domestic market is, I think we can all agree on that, is far too small. So if you want to really scale internationally at scale, of course you should try and make it in the US or in the EU. It's a far bigger customer base in general, whether B2B or B2C. However, the question is always, and that's the one that we are asking ourselves, especially when we talk about resilience of country, where we all grew up in, or at least if we didn't grow up here, then we live now here. The prosperity that this country has, the wealth as such, is actually often, we can say, thanks to, of course, various also stability factors, etc., and government, etc., but also thanks to industry leaders, right, who created jobs, who then also went international. So the Logitechs, the ABBs, the Nestles that we all know are not just operating here, and they didn't just do that with local capital, but we feel if we want to make sure that actually the IP stays here, that actually the jobs are also created here, and for the future of this country, we must act in terms of local growth capital, because that's something we do, unfortunately, not yet have in the same, I would say, density and maturity you were mentioning before, as we have in the earlier stage. So that's kind of our plaidoyer for Switzerland as a nation, going forward also for future generations to come.
In a way, and although that hasn't happened yet so much, right? I think the narrative, at least from my observation, has changed a little bit. While it was a talk about you have to go to Berlin, London, or the US if you grow, I don't hear that often anymore, right? It's sort of a different conversation, or there are different conversations at stake, and now with the geopolitical developments, even in the other direction, and we've never had that, right? That is sort of new, maybe not necessarily related to AI. But yeah, I mean, very optimistic still and positive, and I'm not sure, right? I mean, I hear we have the ingredients, we have the talent, we have the technological expertise, we have the large companies who can integrate AI as clients and also sponsor or finance certain things. Is it sufficient, and we just kind of keep being active as we are, and then it's all going to be good, and we are going to be a innovative leader for the next 10 years to come? Of course, betting on pharma for patents as well, but in AI, in robotics, in deep tech, or what do we need to do, or what do we need to be careful also when we want to stay resilient as a nation with a perspective on startup, entrepreneurship, investment, of course. There are other facets in life, of course.
I have no idea. But I tend to be optimistic as well. And there's this bon mot of, like, especially in investing, as a pessimist, you sound smart, and as an optimist, you make money. So there's that. And my pragmatic view is always that there's a lot of good things going on, and we have this kind of generational virtuous loop where we have startups, successful founders who use their experience and their money to invest in the next generation, which build bigger startups and more successful startups with a broader footprint, which attracts more investors. That's this virtuous circle which iterates generation by generation, and compared to first and foremost Silicon Valley, which has, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 such generations. We have maybe, I don't know, 7-ish or something, so we're just behind. So there's a lot of reason for optimism there in general, I think. But then also, oftentimes in Switzerland, we're just too slow and too cautious and too comfortable, and we have too much to lose and too little risk appetite, and there's these kinds of things which are not easy to change in many ways, where we are dependent on certain mentalities also in founders to build really big things. Maybe 2 thoughts for that.
Maybe if I can add to that, because I think this is really interesting. It's one of the shifts I somehow, kind of from my own observation, think that is happening with AI. I think the founders around AI somehow are much more bullish. I don't know where this comes from. It's maybe because the general kind of atmosphere around it globally is like this. But I think this mentality to build category leaders, to be really, really bold, to kind of be out there, drive solutions. kind of like build companies that really create value globally. I think, in particularly with AI founders, also in the early stages, I think there is a huge shift in mentality. And I kind of, again, it's observational, so I'm curious if others see that differently. But I feel we have, maybe it has also to do with what I already mentioned before, that there is more role models around it. There is much more availability of information of how to build these companies, of an exchange between successful founders and new founders. But I experience an incredible shift in how founders think in Switzerland.
It might also be because the feedback loop is quicker in a lot of cases. And it's not like, in a lot of cases, you're not building for 10 years or for a long time, and then they go out. There's a quite immediate feedback loop in a lot of cases. But I wanted to add to, one thing on the optimism side, I really want, sometimes we underestimate how much Switzerland is on the radar for AI and the prowess and the talent that we have. And it's just amazing. Every globally leading company is looking into the Greater Zurich area to capture talent there. And again, coming back to the Lakera example, if you've read the press release, what Checkpoint, the acquirer, said is that Lakera is going to build the nucleus of their global center of excellence in AI. So they're well aware that there is a lot of talent here and that they need this talent. But I think one of the things that one of the problems or the challenges is probably more, according to what Mike said, right, in terms of being hesitant and adoption, really. And we can look at it at an individual level, how we adopt or how we are allowed to adopt, but also the big incumbent companies that we have in Switzerland. If you look at, they need to be aware that this is a real risk if they lose out, and they need to push the adoption there. And I think that's the only way to actually benefit from that and to stay resilient as a total ecosystem. And I think the incumbent players, not necessarily AI players, but the big companies, they play a vital role there. And that's something that we've seen across the board. It's again, something when you got acquisitions happening, not necessarily in AI, but across the board, it's this hesitant approach that typically not only the Swiss companies, but the European companies in general, compared to the US companies, take. And I think that compounds in the AI case, because then people are even more careful, and do I need that? Do I have to do something there? And being quick there, and I think that's hugely important for resilient and to develop as an ecosystem.
I found it interesting with this kind of mentality or behavior, because I would have echoed you, Victoria, this being bold, I think 10, 15 years ago, we still talked like we're too shy in Switzerland, we are too not thinking big enough. I don't hear that often now anymore. And also it's quite mixing, right? It's mixing in terms of international people here at St. Gallen, or in, I think, Zurich, over 50% of citizens are coming from abroad or first generation from abroad. So there is over time cultural shifts going on. And then with AI, the talk is, you have to grow. We saw the figures of Lovable and others, right? This is, if that's possible, why not start as a student here and think that big, right? So it's maybe nearer there, and I cannot remember 10, 15 years ago having would be interesting in the .com era. Did it also lead to some kind of shift in behavior, or how people went on stage? We hear maybe later some anecdotes from the veterans. More questions? Any more questions from the audience?
There.
So.
Where do you... There's a pillar, there's a lighting. I cannot even see you, but thank you for moving the hands.
Just shortly about myself, I started my life in 2 startups. I'm an engineer. I had stock options for a very big sale to Intel, and I used that money to start a startup making Bluetooth chips. It lasted for 7 years, but in the end, a competition from Cambridge exceeded us, even though we had a working prototype. So ever since, I've been catching up and learning things in terms of technology integration. I think it's a great event. My question to you is, you as investors or portfolio holders, how do you choose which business case or entrepreneurs to support? Because everything is moving so fast that it's impossible. The second thing is, once you have decided to choose somebody, I mean, Herr Locker, you talked about mode, which I think is important. But once you have actually achieved or invested in somebody, how do you coach them and help them to survive and not be taken over within 10 weeks?
Thank you for the question, and maybe I can add on that question, because that would be generally interesting to know from you, but in particular in AI, as things are moving so fast and these modes are challenged so fast, that Adrian also changed.
Yeah. I mean, we look in all our investments, that's not special to AI, we look at the really tech differentiation. So there needs to be some differentiation, some differentiated technological substance. Now that's a very high-level description of what we're looking at, but I think that's the starting point for differentiation. And then to what I said before in terms of looking at the tech stack, I think when you look at applications in AI, we look at these two things. What I said before is proprietary data, access to proprietary data, and workflow integration is hugely important. And funnily enough, because the AI itself is commoditizing, and we do see it in our portfolio, to be honest, where we have companies that do have this access to proprietary data, and they are being approached by the kind of the more generic AI players, and they're asking them, hey, why don't we collaborate? You got the data, I got the AI. And so what we are saying is, okay, fine, it's harder to get the data, the AI, we can do ourselves eventually. So that's where you end up. So that's why we have this, why we look at it this way. And I think it's one of the big things is when you say how do we support them and how do we help them, and one of the things was mentioned before in terms of geographical expansion, where to go and how to support that. But I think one of the big things is actually the talent, and how do you get access to the talent, because this is really scarce, and if you're a technologically differentiated company, you will need certain talent, certain high-end talent. And I think there we look a lot at the background of the people. If these people, as founders, with their technological expertise and their technological approach and credentials, really, how attractive they are to talent, that you can actually build out the talent pool. I think that's in AI particularly relevant, and it's a very important point from an investment perspective.
So for us, technology is important. You mentioned that already for us, and talent. So for us, in this very early stage that we invest, it's mostly about market size and talent, the founder people, because usually it's not the first idea, it's maybe the second idea or some modification of the first ideas or whatever that is successful. So you need people who can see it through, who are resilient enough to see it through. So that's another angle on resilience there. In our case, we also look at the impact, because that's one of our missions. And then with regard to AI, we're lucky enough that we don't fund pure AI players. All the companies we invest in, their AI is a means to an end, which makes it maybe a little bit easier to gauge whether they have potential or not. And then you also asked about coaching. How do you coach the people to success? And this is a simplistic answer, but my goal is to choose people that don't need coaching at all, and know themselves what they need to do and how to get to success. There's enough problems that will be there anyway. And then, of course, you have to do some coaching, because every founder and every founder team has some blind spots. And I think that's I see that as my main responsibility to identify the blind spots and put the finger on them and help them resolve those.
When I started in venture capital, there was still kind of an investment vertical called digital technologies. No one invests in digital anymore. Everything is digital. I think we will see a similar thing with AI. AI is not, in that sense, a vertical to invest in, and this is why I think just going back again to being bullish about application, or even if you, for example, if you take, for example, the topic of agents that everyone is talking about. Building a deeply integrated vertical agent, or also horizontal agent that understands the full workflow of a client, that has the right setup from a security point of view. There is numerous other elements that add up to making agents truly value-adding corporates. This will take a lot of time, and there is a lot of opportunities in there. So I think we will just, what we're currently hearing and seeing is so surface level still. We are really, really, really interested in when it comes to these deeply domain expertise-driven, deeply integrated, workflow integrated, proprietary data plays. And there is an abundance of opportunities. So I think it's going to be really exciting. So I know this is a bit probably repetitive because we're all somehow, I think, echoing each other. But yeah, I think this AI is not will not be in that sense an investment vertical. It will be how AI is changing applications and industries.
It would indeed be brave to stand here and say it's all a hoax and it's not going to work and don't use AI. Hey, we're coming to the end of the halftime. We have a break now, so if there's more questions, there's now a whole, 32 minutes where we can have a little apéro and ask questions to the panelists. Unless there's some final word that you really wanted to say and didn't have a chance to say, I set the bar high for making the break shorter. We heard how to stay resilient. We heard keep investing in talent, and being in a university, I think, is the best place to say that. And there are some tendency where this is challenged in terms of public investments in educational and research areas. So we need to keep investing. So the Zurich ecosystem with all the big tech is not a surprise. It's like a consequence of investing in talent. We heard bringing the corporates stronger into the conversation and into the AI development and opportunity to grow. We heard stay bold, stay hungry, use this kind of AI ambition generally to overcome our Swiss conservative, be very precise, concrete, and going step by step maybe. And we heard deep integration in the value generation. If we build startups, let's look into how to really integrate it, understand the industry, understand the corporates in there, or the SMEs, or the end customer, and really deep in the value creation, so you cannot be taken too far. You have something to add?
I will say one thing
Yes.
that I wanted to add, because we had this before, and at the moment the US with all their foundational models is looming so large. But one perspective is that we're just at the beginning of AI, and there's so many things to do in AI. So maybe in 10 years, if we look back, we just see that the foundational models that we have now that are just focusing on text and video and images was just a minor part. I mean, because if you think AI going to the physical world, that's going to be really interesting. And there's a lot of stuff happening, and that's exactly the area where Switzerland is so strong when it comes to these robotics, but also collecting physical data and collecting data that you don't find on the internet and that you don't find on YouTube. So there's a lot more to come. And I think Switzerland, with that position, the importance is only going to grow, because the direction where AI is going plays in Switzerland's favor.
And we heard that we are in a pretty good position. We heard that the flywheel of founders over generations are coming. What hasn't changed is still this growth capital question, or instis, or pension funds. That will come. So it can be quite exciting to build a company, be it in AI or related to AI here. And with that, let's go into the break. Big applause for our panelists. Thank you so much. A 30-minute break, and then there's the better half coming even.
Ja, also ich bin jetzt gerade But let's try to, like, all of us, not like more. I find it nicer, like, if you run out of questions, you can freestyle it. But I think it's nicer if you have a higher pace. Exactly. So, I mean, mass in general will come out. I don't know anything about it. It's usually the dog. Or maybe I'm talking to myself. But so we start with the status quo, we go into the students where it's at stake, what's the and then we end on what do we think in the future of the problem. Then I have some like extra questions, like the problem doesn't end on us, in case we can. Okay, cool, nice, have fun. That's before your talk. We need to be mic'd up. No, mic'd up. And then mic, no, first
Very professional.
Wir suchen den Harald. Kann der Harald mal zur Fotowand kommen, bitte? Harald Nieder, bitte zur Fotowand.
Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Good evening again. Break is over. Die Pause ist vorbei. I hate to be interrupting the conversations because this is half or more of the reasons why you come. I can guarantee you it's well worth it to interrupt it now, because what comes now is, I said it earlier and I can say it, I moderated the panel better than the first half. Let's see what's coming. Please take a seat. Hey, great to have you back. Great to have you back. Let's start with the second half of the evening, the AI talk on resilience. When I came to Switzerland for the first time, to St. Gallen for the first time in my life, in, I believe, 2008, 7 or 8 it was, I went to the St. Gallen Symposium as a participant, and in one of the workshops I spoke to a very, very tall guy, and he was telling me about venture capital and startup, and he was from a company called Brains2 Ventures. Christian Schütz, my very first friend in Switzerland, he's a partner. You've been working together because now Brains2 Ventures is called B2 Venture, has a tremendous history, development in startup ecosystem out of St. Gallen in investing. And you, Andreas, you joined in 2019, I believe, as a partner officially. Andreas has been a veteran in the startup, entrepreneurship, investment ecosystem for quite some time. We can hear stories from the .com era even, I mentioned it earlier. So interesting to see the parallels we have today in the large AI development. Andreas is a serial entrepreneur. Back then he was both CEO and CTO in the .com era, sold the company, led it successfully through the tough times at that time. Became an investor as well, and not only investing in AI with B2 Venture, but also writing on LinkedIn. I think it's Alan Fry and you who always appear highest on my LinkedIn with posts. Most recently, a very funny game or quiz trying to find out which hat is on which famous startup founder. So Andreas Göldi on LinkedIn. Andreas Göldi, a big applause for you. Thank you for giving the keynote for the second half.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and thanks for having me. When I started preparing this presentation, I quickly found out that it was probably a very bad idea to agree to this topic, because it's very hard to build something resilient in this wild market that we are currently in. So here's the mandatory chart with the growth rate of Lovable. Every AI presentation needs one. And what is behind this is many other success stories that are not quite as extreme, but according to some statistics, AI companies indeed grow their revenue about 3 times faster than traditional software as a service companies. So this is a real trend, a real market, real growth. But of course, not everything is so easy, because when you go behind the sexy headlines, you find a lot of stories about very well-financed companies that have failed for a variety of reasons. But when you look into it, for the most part, these were not problems with technology, they were problems with business models, changing market conditions, bad market fit, and so on. This is what kills most AI startups. And we want to talk today about how you can prevent this as a founder. So the reality is currently that everybody in AI is experimenting with business models. It feels like new ideas pop up almost every month. agents as a service, pay per output item, etc., robots as a service, lots of fun stuff. And the reality is that we have not found the so-called dominant design for what an AI company is going to look like in terms of business models. That's not surprising. In previous technology waves like software as a service, this took well over a decade, so we are just in the middle of this experimentation phase currently. But if you're an AI founder, it doesn't mean that you can just wing it and improvise and pivot every 2 days. That's a very bad idea, of course. You have to think very carefully about your business model. And a great framework for that, many of you are certainly familiar with that, is Alex Osterwalder's classic business model canvas, invented in Switzerland and used all over the world. And it really basically forces you as a founder to think very holistically about all the components that go into a real business model. So it's the value proposition in the middle, of course. It's who your customers are, who you're selling to, at what price point, which revenue streams, and also who the key partners are that provide stuff that you need to build your product at what kind of cost structure. So all these things go into a business model. And the issue with AI is really that even when you build this fancy business model, this futuristic AI business model, you are playing in a market where very fierce market forces are going to attack you. And if your business model is not resilient enough, then you might unfortunately end up with a steaming pile of rubble. AI videos are fun. I made this with Nano Banana and Kling AI. It's a lot of fun. You should try it. So let's talk about what the 3 main challenges are really for current AI business models and well beyond that. The first category is the adoption trap. So how do I find a real market need that is not just driven by hype? How do I go beyond endless pilot projects? And how do I find out which customers are mature enough to actually sell to? Then we have the defensibility trap. We are playing in a very noisy market. How do I stand out? How do I deal with open source as a disruption potential? And how do I take on platform risk when the big guys are going after me? And then the margin trap. How do I avoid having low gross margins? How do I ever get to profitability? And how do I deal with surprises like regulatory costs? So I'm going to talk about all these 3 buckets here. So first, the adoption trap. Now, the good news is, especially when you're a B2B AI startup, you will probably find somebody who wants to do a pilot project with you because everybody is currently experimenting. The spending on AI LLM models alone is already in the many billions and keeps growing very quickly. The problem is having a pilot is not the same as having product market fit. It just means that somebody found your pitch cool enough to give you some money, hopefully even that. And the reality is that, for instance, Gartner says that more than 30% of AI pilots never make it to production. That's the most optimistic number I actually read so far. In reality, it's probably higher than that. And the often cited study from MIT is saying that 95% of generative AI pilots at companies are failing because they are not fulfilling their ROI expectations. So that's really the reality out there that we see for many startups. So why is that? Typical issues are that the customer, the big enterprise that you're selling to, doesn't even know themselves what their ROI expectations are. All this stuff is so new, nobody has an idea what to expect. Technology is still immature and can often be a bit disappointing. And there's also a lot of cultural resistance at companies. Nobody wants to get automated away, and therefore it's very often hard to really get this stuff into production in reality. So many AI pilots are actually really innovation theater. To be not overly mean, but the CEO heard on the golf course, everybody's now doing AI, I need one of these projects as well, and then start doing something like that. And you would be surprised how often that is really the case, instead of really doing a serious project. Another factor is really that the difference in AI maturity between different industries is very vast. So according to data from Accenture, the tech industry is, needless to say, not surprisingly, the most mature, but a bit disappointing for Swiss startups. Our quite well represented industries, healthcare and banking, are actually way behind the curve. Industrial is somewhere in the middle in terms of maturity, and life sciences at least makes it to the top 5. But the point here is that if you're selling to a bank or a healthcare company, you have to expect a much lower degree of maturity and adaptability compared to, for instance, a tech company. So this is something to be very careful about. Now, how do you get around that? How do you sell to conservative industries? The trick is actually not to talk so much about AI, ironically. And the great example is our portfolio company Vestigas, based in Munich. They make a solution that digitizes the whole paperwork on construction sites, because construction sites are very messy. There are all these delivery slips and invoices, etc. So a lot of chaos. And they basically sell a solution that makes sense of all of this and digitizes it. Vestigas uses very, very sophisticated AI behind the scenes, complex architecture, all the latest fancy stuff, agentic workflows, multi-model models, vector database, etc., right? Anything that you can imagine. And guess how often the Vestigas website talks about AI? 0 times. You will not find the word AI on this website because their customers don't care that it's AI. Quite the contrary, they're probably scared if you tell them that their construction site is now run by an artificial intelligence. They care about the solution, and the solution happens to be implemented with very, very sophisticated AI. So that's a way how to get around these adoption concerns. So tips for adoption resilience, the old rule still applies, make something people want, and ideally, more importantly than ever, that creates tangible value very quickly. It shouldn't be a technology experiment, it should really be something that moves the needle for the customer. Pick a customer segment and problem that is truly ready for AI. And also use adoption pain as an opportunity. For instance, we see a lot of startups now selling consulting services to implement all this stuff, and customers are very happy to pay for that. Consulting is not a dirty word anymore in the tech industry. It's an enabler to get this stuff on the ground. The next topic, defensibility. So I'm not going to ask, but I'm sure some of you have started or plan to start an AI agent startup. Congratulations, you're going to end up somewhere on one of these market maps here as one of many, many other companies. This is by no means complete. There are probably 10 times as many agent companies out there compared to what you see here. And the data point from our own deal flow, where the companies that mention AI agents as their core technology, 2 years ago, almost nobody had that, and then it exploded, and now it feels almost every company is an AI agent company. So chasing these kinds of buzzwords will not help you with defensibility. It will confuse your customers. It might sound sexy to some investors, but when they look behind the scenes, they have very different questions. So chasing buzzwords, very bad idea. The next challenge for defensibility is open source. And we have already heard about Apertus, the new open LLM created here in Switzerland, great basis for innovation. And open source has become really super crucial in AI. According to this study here from Stanford, the pink line is the performance of open source models compared to closed models. And open has almost caught up now to closed models. There's only a tiny handful of closed foundation model providers that still matter. All the mid-range people have been disrupted away by open source. So competing against open source on this foundation level is not a great idea. And it's also not always a great idea in the middle layer of tools. And a great example for that is Pinecone, a maker of vector databases that are used in many AI setups to store data very efficiently. 2 years ago, this was an absolute superstar of a company, raised over 100 million from top VC, almost valued as a unicorn, seen as the leader in this field. Now it's trying to sell itself because its business has already collapsed. Why? Because Postgres, the granddaddy of open source databases, over 35 years old, has rolled out vector database capabilities for free, right? And this is a product that people already know, super robust, free, everybody can use it immediately, killed an entire sector. So betting against open source is a very bad idea. And it's an even worse idea to fall into a trap that is addressed by a classic stupid investor question. If you have ever raised money from VCs, you have definitely heard, but what if Google does this, right? And normally the correct answer is Google doesn't care about your stupid little niche market. That's really not where they are going. But this has really changed in AI. The big companies are now going into niche after niche that would have been very hard for them to capture before that. And a good example is creativity tools. So this is a market map here, again, not complete, of startups that provide image generation and video generation tools. Midjourney, for instance, is a very well-known one. And this is currently completely being disrupted because Google just launched its image generation model, Nano Banana, as well as its video generation model. And they have gone completely insanely viral on social media. For a while, it felt like half of my TikTok feed was a VO-generated video. And the result is now that Google's Gemini app, AI app, is now the most downloaded app on the App Store globally. So who would have thought that good old Google can still go viral with something like that? And of course, this is basically killing off the entire left part of the picture here, because betting against Google with its billions of users, good luck doing that, right? So we see this kind of disruption all the time. And OpenAI CEO Sam Altman very charmingly put this as, we are going to steamroll you. And he was talking about AI startups specifically that are trying to build something that is clearly on the roadmap of OpenAI. And OpenAI is expanding its roadmap constantly. They just announced that they are going to create a job platform for job ads and matching between companies and job seekers. So this is not somebody you necessarily want to compete against, right? So how do you work around that? Well, you make something that OpenAI doesn't want to do and Google doesn't want to do. And this means solve an unusual problem with advanced AI technology and a creative business model. And a great example from our portfolio is Nautica Technologies, an ETH spin-off that makes, and this sounds very strange, autonomous robots that clean large ships. So you would think, well, that's weird, but you would be shocked how big this market is, because when all these mussels and slime, etc., assemble on the ship, it slows it down, it costs much more in fuel, there's environmental regulation that requires you to clean the ship before you sail to a different part of the world and so on. And cleaning a large container ship can cost millions per year. And Nautica has basically created these independent robots based on standard hardware, but very smart AI software, also built on open source partially, that they now sell as robot as a service. So as a ship owner, you don't buy the robot, you pay Nautica an annual fee to have a clean ship. And they take care of the rest with this technology. And again, very advanced. These robots have to be able to navigate underwater and with currents and so on. Very sophisticated technology and a great niche to start from, of course, when you're an AI robotic startup. So that's the kind of thing that really flies. So tips for defensibility, resilience, don't just chase the latest buzzwords, offer a clearly differentiated solution in a relevant market, make something that benefits from open source, not something that competes with it, and avoid building something that is clearly on the giant's roadmap. Third topic, the margin trap. So the business model of many AI startups looks something like this, economically speaking. They take a 10 franc note and sell it to their customers for $4.99. And it turns out you can find a lot of customers if you do that. People really like discounted stuff, right? And what I mean by that, as an example, many of these coding agent startups charge their customers $20 a month, and then they give them model capabilities, model capacity for several times that, right? They lose money, substantial amounts of money, on every single customer, and that's very hard to dig out of. And the good news is the underlying models are now getting cheaper. Questionable if you really want to use the cheapest one or if you want to go high-end, but this keeps being a problem. Because it's not that easy, the bad news is AI has a lot of new cost components that traditional software companies, for instance, don't have. So in software as a service, the cost of goods sold, right, what you really directly assign as cost to the product that you sell, are typically about 25%. And that's mostly hosting, some customer service, stuff like that, and then you have a gross margin of 70 to 80% that you can use to feed your business, build your business, and hopefully at some point make a profit. In AI, it's much more complicated. We see many companies that have inference costs of 40% plus of total revenue. Then you pay for retrieval and index stuff, for eval and guardrails, for safety, for hosting and infrastructure, of course, and often also a human in the loop, right, to fix the stuff that the AI didn't get right, and this can kill you. We've had portfolio companies that got killed just by this because they had to fix so many things and pay humans for it that you can easily go out of business. So managing all these cost components is absolutely crucial for an AI startup if you want to survive. Now, many smart entrepreneurs say, okay, no problem, we'll just charge our customers differently. So we go away from the traditional SaaS model, charging per seat, to usage-based, right? So the more they use, the more they pay, or to even outcome-based, they pay for the value that is created. And that sounds great idea, intellectually very compelling. Unfortunately, customers really struggle with that, right? Because it's very different, it's hard to budget, nobody knows what a token exactly is and how you would use it. So the industry is really currently trying to figure out how to sell these new and more complicated business and charging models to the customer base. And then the lovely topic of AI regulation, right? I'm not going to bore you with details, just saying that it's very complicated, both in the EU and in the United States. It keeps changing. Nothing is really rolled out. Customers have not even started to understand regulation and its consequences. But the striking number is that studies, actually from the EU itself, estimate that the regulatory overhead in AI could cost as much as 17% of total AI investments. And that's a very, very large number. If you're a startup in a regulated industry like healthcare and so on, you can assume that it's going to be even more expensive than that. The problem is nobody really knows, right? It's open field, nothing has really been implemented, so we are really playing a game of waiting here. Now, the good news is you can also use regulation as a startup opportunity. For instance, Lattice Flow and Kelvin Risk, two of our investments, offer different kinds of tools that help you with AI governance and compliance and technical assessments and so on. So they really have turned this challenge into a business. And if you're smart about regulation, it can really be a competitive advantage for any kind of AI company. Now, tips for margin resilience: measure your cost components precisely, plan well ahead, spend effort on cost reduction early on, even if it's not fun, but you will need it. Innovate in how you charge customers, but make sure they actually understand and accept it, and be aware of regulatory costs now and how they are going to develop in the future. Okay, to come to the end, to summarize what actually works in the long run beyond the immediate hype. It's actually interesting, the rules for resilience are not different than for older startups. They're just differently applied to the field of AI. So you always want to start with a problem-first approach, right? You learn this in every incubator program as the first thing. Understand your customer. And that's more important than ever because the AI transition is very scary for your customers as well. So really thinking deeply about this, having deep customer empathy is crucial. Provide real solutions and help with adoption, and validate willingness to pay beyond pilots. Absolutely essential. Then design for defensibility. Again, vertical focus helps a lot with that. Leverage open source, don't fight against it, and avoid crowded sectors and also big tech roadmaps. And then unit economics obsession, something we don't see by far enough with startups. Track your costs constantly. Watch out for cost traps that are unexpected, and try new pricing models and experiment with that kind of the thing. So if you're an AI founder and you take care of these things in building your business models, you will end up hopefully with a rock-solid business model for your Swiss AI company. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andreas. And indeed, I mean, so many kind of golden nuggets of knowledge if you're building a company here. So thank you very much, and also for your tireless support of the entrepreneurship ecosystem here in Switzerland for many, many years now. Speaking of many years, we are switching to the younger generation. I mean, no offense to us on stage so far. And for that, I called it the grande finale, for the big final of the evening. We have the panel moderated by Michaela Keller from Founderful. You're doing communication marketing with Founderful, and you are also a student super excited about all things entrepreneurship and AI. Michaela Keller is moderating the final panel. Thank you so much, Michaela.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I'm Michaela. I'll be the host for this last part of the event. I, first of all, would like to warmly welcome all of you and thank you for sharing your time with us tonight. I would like to give yourselves a round of applause, please. So we've heard about the veterans of the AI scene in Switzerland, and that was amazing. but we're making space in this last part of the evening for the next generation. So we have 4 panelists that are building the future of AI. I'm very excited about it. We have people in robotics, AI governance, research, and business. So it's an amazing mix. Let me welcome on stage our 4 panelists. We have Agatha Douzin. We have Stefan Witwer, Angeline Pouget, and Zino Hammers. Let me move my necessities. All right, thank you everybody for being here. So first of all, I would like you to present yourselves, maybe in 30 seconds. That would be a bit long, even though you would all deserve 30 minutes. So in 30 seconds, who you are, what you do, and what do you understand under the term resilience? Agatha, you want to start?
Let's go, sure. Oh, can you hear me properly, actually? Is that better? Oh, yeah, it is. Great. So thank you, Michela, and hi, everyone. So I'm Agatha. I was studying at EPFL doing data science, and there I founded the AI Safety Association, Safe AI Lausanne. And over the years, I've really had the chance to look at AI from different angles. So I was doing academic research, technical research. Now I'm doing that in the industry. It's a bit more hands-on, but I've also worked in AI governance, and I've done some VC for deep tech startups, so lots of different stuff intersecting. And what I really try to do is look at the bigger picture here. It's not just about how AI works, but it's really about how it's going to fit into markets, into like regulation policies, and into society in more generally. And to answer your question, when I hear the word resilience, what really comes to my mind is we have to make sure that AI becomes a technology that really empowers us as a society, and not something that erodes our trust, our democracies, or our human agency.
Very good points. Thank you, Agatha, for being here. Stefan?
So I'm Stefan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Infinity.Swiss. We make the leading AI next-gen accounting product in Switzerland. And when I think about resilience, one observation I'd like to share with you is that I think the AI buttons in products has absolutely gone out of control. There are so many AI functionalities like slapped and bolted on top of existing legacy workflows. And I think if we do want to take the value that AI will create seriously, we have to start fresh and see what, not only like how can we improve parts of existing workflows, but rather instead rethink the work that's being done today, if it needs to be done at all in the future, and start building for that. But that, of course, requires that we're going to have to build a lot more resilient AI systems, because now the AI will, over time, take over a lot more work that's traditionally done by humans. So there's a much higher requirement in terms of the output quality and in terms of the accuracy and autonomy that those agents will do.
Thank you very much, Stefan. That was a bit more than 30 seconds. But no,
Sorry
we'll
about
allow that because that was interesting. No, I'm kidding. Angeline?
Hey, I'm Angeline. I finished my master's at ETH in January, and I'm now at Google DeepMind as a research engineer. So contrary to what was said before, there are some people in Switzerland who know how to build foundation models. And in terms of what I think of when I hear resilience, I think it's mostly kind of future-proofing, and that can be AI, but can also be anything else.
Thank you. Last one, Zino?
Zino, and I'm a founding board member of the ETH's Robotics Club. We're very new, just 3 months, but already doing exciting stuff. Then I'm co-founder of Tactile Robotics, where we're making general robotic intelligence possible, and actually with that human-in-the-loop element by detecting when models fail and jumping in. And I'm also robotics unit at ETH. Resilience, keep on going, and I'll never stop. Yeah.
So that for you is more of a mindset question, the resilience?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to start with the status quo. So how is the new generation perceiving the AI status quo in Switzerland? And I would like to start asking you, Zino, what you think we're doing right now in AI in Switzerland?
I think, Switzerland, the research institutions here are really great, and that is attracting a lot of international talent. I'm international, so many in the masters at ETH, at EPFL. And then so that is all great. Then I see lots of people that are very motivated to go and build things. And there's some spaces like ETH Student Project House that are great, but I would love to, see some more of those. I think that's also something that's really great, kind of this builder's mindset that's being created, yeah.
And if we're to find something that we're doing wrong? Go ahead.
Jump in. I think, while it's great that we have a lot of research capabilities here in Switzerland, one thing I think that could be improved or that is lacking is we don't really have a culture of product thinking and product execution. At least it's not as much as some other countries, especially the US, have. I think this is partially cultural factors, but also I think we have a little bit annoying tendency in Switzerland that a lot of companies do outsource a lot of the product development outside of their own company, sometimes even to agencies outside of the country, like in Serbia, other low-cost labor markets. And I think this is really hurting a lot of like the owning the product and owning the product development, which is really important, especially in the very fast pace that we have in AI today. So it's important to own the roadmap, to have a clear product understanding, and to be able to execute in your own company. In the age of AI, this is a core competency that you absolutely have to own. And I think this is something that a lot of other countries do better. And I think we should be able to learn from that.
Is there anything that any of you would change about the status quo? If I gave you a magic wand and as of now you could change something concretely, is there anything that you would change now?
Just to go a little bit on the first point, like comparing the Zurich, I just know about the Zurich ecosystem, to places like San Francisco, it's still a bit rigid, and kind of young people, you have all these hacker houses, and they really fuel the system there. And there are some spaces, but I would love to see more of those. And rent is expensive, and so maybe it's a bit harder, but I think that would help. Spaces for young people to create businesses. Yeah.
Maybe one other thing more from the research side of things. I think what has happened a bit over the last couple of years is that a lot of in Switzerland, we have very big, very good research institutes, including ETH and EPFL. But a lot of them, in terms of the research they're doing, they're trying to stay very, very close to what is happening in industry at the moment. Whereas I think there's many, many open questions around diversity, fairness, safety, reliability of these AI systems that these universities are very well positioned to tackle instead of maybe building the next open source model. A bit spicy, but I think that would be my take.
Yeah, maybe to follow up on that, I think there's a bigger trend of we should do more long-term thinking instead of just chasing the short-term hype. And this is not a specifically Swiss thing, but I think we have the keys here to really do that better than the rest of the world. And it's very easy to look at the keywords to get funding if you use them right and if you tell it to the right people. But in the end, on the research side, we're optimizing for citations, and the easiest way to do that is following the hype and just doing a paper that follows what everyone else is doing. And yeah, I think AI is already a space where people are pushed to be ambitious, but we're not doing it the right way.
So what exactly would you change?
Thinking about how it's going to be in 10 years and not how it's going to be by the next submission deadline or by the next funding round.
So we're talking resilience here.
Yeah, it is connected to it.
And what do you think our generation right now, what role do we play in this resilience game right now?
Yeah, it's a very particular role for sure, because I think our generation is living the inflection point of AI. If you look at it from 10 years ago, and I think I'm not the first person saying that tonight, but 10 years ago it was more of an academic curiosity, something that was only being studied in labs or that was being used in very narrow application or contexts. And if you look at the last 3 years, then you had tech like ChatGPT coming out, and now I think most of the people here are using it on a daily basis, and in tech circles particularly, you can see how central it has become. You go to any tech event, non-AI related, they will be talking about AI still. And since we're living in this inflection point, I think our role is really we're going to shape how AI is going to be developed and how it's going to integrate into society. And this, of course, is both a huge opportunity and a huge responsibility. Because on one hand, we have the chance to make AI a technology that can empower us. If you look at what AI can do, it can help us distribute knowledge, it can help society more generally anticipate shocks. Like it can do early warnings for climate change, it can help us prevent some financial crisis. It's super good at helping with cybersecurity defense, for example. But on the other hand, this is just as much as a huge responsibility for us. Because if we don't get it right, and we will see, I think, in that talk what getting right means, but if we don't get it right, AI can also make the world much more fragile. It can deepen inequalities, it can lead to concentration of power, and more generally, it can erode our democracies with stuff like deepfake, misinformation, and much more with how autonomous AI is becoming. And if we get it wrong, it will leave us dependent on systems that we don't fully understand and that we don't fully control. And I'm not saying that as a doomer perspective, but more as this is an extremely exciting challenge to be working on, and this is what our generation will have to solve.
So would you say you're still positively thinking about the future after all of this still?
Yes, I'm extremely hyped about the future, but I don't think it's something that will happen by default, and I think we have to be proactive in creating that future for us.
And I was wondering, Angeline, since you are very embedded in this research, high quality research, and you're like at the front of this development, do you think there's something that we're overseeing right now in what is at stake?
Maybe overseeing is the wrong word, and I think you might have another question on this later, but I think one thing where I have probably a very different point of view from the public is how good these models actually are and how advanced they are. Because I think in my work, all day long, I spend time finding all the mistakes that these models make and kind of trying to patch them one by one. So I'm not as afraid about like the AI dominating because the models aren't that good yet. And I think that's something where probably actually being in research is very different from using ChatGPT and kind of observing the hype from a more distant point of view. Because, yeah, the models are good, but they still have a lot of potential.
That's good to know. That's good news for everybody that thinks that AI will overtake. I think we wanted to, delve a bit more in this resilience topic and also the fairness. Do you think, Zeno, that AI is creating more resilience right now or making us more fragile?
I mean, I definitely think it makes us more fragile at the moment. I mean, it's great that it can do things that you might find boring, administrative tasks, and help in business. But for myself, I feel like a lot of, while otherwise I would use my brain, now I use ChatGPT. And I feel like lots of people they're losing out on some learnings, and on that's fragile. Also, fragile since we give more power, to AI, we know what happens in the future. And also, being in robotics, lots of manual labor jobs will not be replaced in 2 years, but in 5 or 10, definitely. And also, your desk jobs will be replaced. So how do we deal with that? And that's, I think, very hard questions.
Yeah, this feels also a bit opposed. We were just hearing, Angeline was like, AI is not taking over, and now Zeno is like, well, in robotics, what we see is that a lot of manual labor is gonna be replaced.
Not yet, right? Not yet, but I can see a future where it is not. So, yeah.
And how do you think, are we seeing the risks of that? Or do we have this under control? What do you think the risks could be of deploying AI?
I think there's societal risks, just people not having a job, protests, societal unrest. It's real, and so then you have to think who deals with that. And I don't think in the West that governments really have the right people there to make these decisions. I think I think it's now in these private industries and these thought leaders, AI leaders, entrepreneurs, and people need to have responsibility, because if they don't do it, who will do it, right? So that's a bit my take on it.
So you give the responsibility to private people, but also businesses?
To businesses, to private people, yeah.
And Stefan, what is your point of view here? You are building a business and you're building a business for businesses.
Right, I mean, I won't exactly apologize for automating away work that nobody really likes to do in the first place. There's so much inefficient work being done right now in businesses. And I mean, accounting is like one of the prime examples, because accounting is often cited as the number one use case, at least in B2B, for AI. It has been for years, even before ChatGPT, right? Because so much of it is recurring, so much of it is very similar to how it's been done in the past. But the problem was that in the past, there are often these outliers that made it very hard. There were like enough of them to make it very hard to really automate it end to end, right? So what we now have an opportunity to do is to really rethink if that work needs to be done in the first place. And I'm not saying that those jobs are like entirely gone from the market, because what we've often seen in the past is that those jobs are replaced by better jobs. And I think this is going to be the case in a lot of at least the desk jobs that we're seeing in business. There's with the example we have, we talked with a lot of fiduciaries. Like our AI accounting product already automates hundreds of thousands of transactions for small businesses every year. And the fiduciaries that we talk to, they see this, and they also see this as a chance for themselves, because they can now use this to be much more productive, and they can move on, like from manual bookings over to more high leverage work, like consulting in tax, consulting in financial close, etc. And I suspect this is what's going to happen in many of the desk jobs that are affected.
So what we're saying here is, by every risk, there's also there's always
huge opportunity. Yeah.
And what do you think needs to be built with AI to be, for instance, now implemented and be effective for businesses?
I mean, it goes back to what I said in the beginning, because if you build very surface level AI integrations into the products, which we're seeing right now, then that's going to be very easily disruptable by also like an incumbent that comes into the market. But what you need to do is to really rethink, if you're a new player entering into the market and trying to implement some sort of AI automation, you have to rethink how the work is done in the first place, or will be done in 10 years when the AI models get even better. I think this is the right approach to go about this.
Now I have a question is open to all of you. Is there any hype or trend that gives you hope right now for the future that is to come in AI still? No. Hope is not
at
there.
all.
No, but I feel like the fact that you're asking about hope kind of assumes that per se we have a somewhat pessimistic view of the future. I don't have that. So I don't have a specific trend that gives me hope, because I feel like, yeah.
And then maybe rephrasing the question, what is it that gives you this constant positive mindset towards it?
I think the fact that we keep making progress in important directions, like, of course, we still talk about fairness, diversity, these issues, but if you look at models from 3-4 years ago, of course, they weren't as powerful, but they for sure weren't as diverse, and they for sure weren't as fair. So I feel like as models become more and more capable, hopefully we'll also be able to kind of tune them in the right ways to handle some of these trickier topics better.
So what is exactly meant with diversity and inclusion in models, for instance?
So one example, like a research project that I worked on at DeepMind before joining full-time, was that for vision language models, they're frequently trained on web data, which is predominantly Western, so predominantly North American or European, and they work decidedly well, less good on African or Asian data. So that's diversity, for example. The diversity of training data would be one example.
Thank you. I was also having this thought while coming to St. Gallen today. and it was whether AI right now is a common good, right? It's accessible to some extent. Do you think it is a common good, it will become a common good, or what is the gap between it being what it is now and to it being a common good for everybody, so to be also inclusive on who accesses it?
I think open models and kind of the two curves we've seen before, the pink one catching up to the blue one, I think that's a big part to making AI more accessible, because it also then allows smaller businesses to use them without having to pay for exorbitantly expensive APIs. And I think also models becoming smaller in general, because it will just become easier to, inference becomes easier the smaller, or cheaper the smaller the model is. And I think that also makes it more accessible.
I see you're nodding, Stefan. Do you think there's any other gap that we should overcome before it becomes truly a common good?
I think, maybe to build on your point in terms of the accessibility, I think AI can be a tremendous enabler in that way, because, I mean, the small business example is a great one, not only in terms of the models, but also in terms of the capabilities that you have as a human, right? Because if you're about to start a startup, there's so much work you have to do that's involved. And what we're seeing is that you can do a lot less work, or you have to do a lot less work now as like one person. You can do the work of many other people now, especially without, that's certainly our goal with the AI accounting, right? That you don't have to be an expert in that yourself, and you can automate some part of that work. So I think if you're starting a business, for example, that's a huge enabler, even for people that don't necessarily have a business background, for example. So in terms of that, that's pretty big for accessibility.
I think we have a slight bias here, is that when we talk about common good, we're thinking about people like us, so like in tech or startup bubbles. But if you think about the average user, I think we still have a huge digital literacy gap to fill. Like if you look at how your parents use it, or even like someone that doesn't study technology or business, when you look at how inefficiently they use AI systems, how much they over-rely on it for some stuff or under-rely on it for other stuff, I think this is something that we can fix quite easily, and we're not putting that much work into it.
So how would you fix it?
I think you don't need to have like a lot of technical understanding. You just need to build an intuition of what it can and what it cannot do, or like what are the strengths and limits of this technology. And that's, I think it's just a matter of kind of public education around that. Like, for example, with the internet, we kind of, with the time, we learn how to use it, and like now it feels intuitive when you see an image that is obviously fake, or when you see a pop-up that is obviously a scam. And with AI, we don't have this intuition yet, and we might want to accelerate that. Just saying.
I agree that there's a gap when it comes to literacy. I don't think there's a big gap when it comes to accessibility. So I think we should distinguish between those two.
I think this is a good time to ask if there's any question in the audience, because then we will, otherwise we will proceed. But I think there were very important points raised, and also from very different perspectives. So if anybody has any question, would like to raise any further points on what has been discussed, feel free. Yes, go ahead. Cyril will come with a mic.
Thank you very much. I have a question. In your opinion, do you think more we're at the edge of a new AI winter or burst of the AI bubble, or do you think now and in the near future we will see this rapid growth continue, this rapid trajectory, and maybe also from a research perspective and from a business perspective?
Maybe from a business perspective, not sure. With NVIDIA investing in OpenAI, I'd be buying GPUs. So we'll see. I'm pretty sure AI will create a lot of value, but there do seem to be some circular dependencies in the ecosystem at the moment.
Maybe to add on the business side, I do think there is some extent of overhype right now, and I think that's going to correct itself certainly in the near to midterm future. But there are also a lot of generational category leader companies that are still about to be made if you start really rethinking the processes as they are today. I mean, accounting is one example, but there are also, you can apply that to a lot of different industries where there's a lot of repetitive work being done, or a lot of, at least in some way, partially automatable or rethinkable work being done. And once you really start to get into those, it's much harder to do, of course, than the AI buttons that you have today. But once you really get to that, I think that's where a lot of the value unlock is going to happen, at least from the business side.
Maybe I can bring a research perspective on it. A funny thing was that, when we talk about artificial general intelligence, so something that can automate most of human cognitive labor, before the release of GPT-5, the median was around like 2030. And after the release of GPT-5, it was around 2040. So I'm not saying this is an AI winter, but on the purely research side, like, are we going to have a new explosion in capabilities or something? The hype has died down a bit. But then I think there's so much more to be done on the business side and how it integrates into real life. Like right now we have systems that work in bubbles, they perform well on benchmarks, but then to go from that to something that people actually use and that can fit into existing workflows and pipelines, I think this is where we will see something in the next 2 to 3 years. And you have startups like Mechanize who are explicitly trying to automate the economy. And this is not done by having like a crazy research innovation, but more by like understanding who's using it and how to make this transition smooth.
Maybe a slightly different take from a Google research perspective. The GPT-5 release wasn't particularly successful, but I'd say from what I see, I don't think that we see a flattening of performance improvements at the moment. So stay tuned for the next Google release.
Do you have to say this, or?
I don't, but I have stock now.
So I think this is a very good point. We were also saying the value that you create, it goes what you do with the technology you have and how you implement it, right? That's a very good point. Zino, would you like to add anything?
No.
Good. Any other question? I saw other hands being raised.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for this nice panel. I have just a question on how you see actually that the AI agents will actually deal with the, let's say, the problem of hallucinations, or the problem that still most of the reasoning models are just replicating the distributions of their training data. So if tasks are actually more complex and take longer, these agents fail massively. And yeah, since we have some technical people here, I was actually curious if there's some new approaches to deal with these problems and challenges, because I think that actually speaks to the problem of, is AI a hype or not? Because fundamentally, we cannot go into high-risk applications because of that problem. Thank you.
Maybe I can start on that, because it was I just published a paper exactly on this topic. So basically, OpenAI reached out to my team because they wanted us to help evaluate like their computer use agents before they were released. And it turns out it's not solved at all. It's even worse than in LLM systems. So for LLMs, we kind of figured out, of course, we haven't solved the safety problem, but now it's decently good. We have decent guardrails and safeguards so that it doesn't hallucinate too much, or at least your average user is not affected too much by it. The problem is when you put these LLMs into a scaffolding, now they can interact with tools, now they can click on your computer, now they can do dozens of steps instead of just one at a time, then most of the stuff we had done breaks. So like before, if you ask like GPT how can I build a bomb, it's going to say, sorry, I cannot help with that. Now if you ask the agent version of GPT, how do I build a bomb? Maybe at first it says no, but after like 10 steps, it's going to start helping you. And so the stuff that we thought we had solved for LLMs is kind of now we are taking a step back and realize that agents are a new paradigm. I'm not saying that it's unsolvable. It's still like the beginning of this new venture of AI, but it's something that we have to kind of redo. And safety is not something that scales like capabilities. Taking GPT-4 and making it into GPT-5 means you have to come up with new types of safety measures, and you cannot just scale what you already have. So it's just something to keep in mind. And since capabilities go so fast, safety is also a science that should be aiming to go as fast as before. So yeah, your initial question was on AI agents and hallucinations. Right now, it's still an open problem, and we don't have a very secure way to prevent them. But I think in the next few months, we should have very good advances on that, I expect.
Zino, I see your facial expressions. Do you want to add something?
No, I mean, I guess you were mostly talking about the safety part, right? But I'm just curious about the performance part. Yeah.
Maybe I wanted to answer the second part of your question, actually. When will the models kind of stop just outputting the distribution that they learned? They don't. that's inherently what they're trained to do. And that's what the architecture is made for. So they won't unless we change the architecture or something like fundamental about the model, but current autoregressive models are trained to reproduce their training distribution.
But I think for a lot of industry applications, that's perfectly fine already, because you have so many business problems are quite replicatable. So using synthetic data or even just training data, I think you can, if you can automate already 95% or 90% of common cases, that's already a massive value and massive savings of cost for a business. And if you start to apply that, then that's already quite interesting.
Does that clear your point?
No, I mean, I think they're very good answers. I probably agree also that they train to just kind of do the same distributions of the data. But I think many people are not aware of this, right? Because they think there will be a generalization. I'm not so sure if that's going to happen. But thank you very much.
I can maybe add one thing. I think just from my experience, like working a bit on agents for kind of scene understanding and robotics, that it's a lot about feedback loops, kind of seeing basically another model that observes what happens and says, okay, here, because recognizing when something goes wrong is not that difficult as making the whole thing. So I think having the right feedback loops in there is quite important. Just some of my experience. Yeah.
All right, we will open the questions again at the end. We will proceed with the last wrapping topic. Let's see how long this takes. There's a lot of talking about manifesting. So it's this thing where you think strongly enough about something and you make it happen. So me and Sabine Wildermann, we manifested this event back in spring. So we were really hoping to create a good event, and then we worked for it because we thought about it and we concretely worked for it. Is there anything that you manifest now? So you are currently building the future of AI. So I imagine that your beliefs today will also shape the AI of tomorrow. Is there something that you're manifesting now for the AI future in Switzerland of 10 years from now?
I can start with an easy one, but I'm manifesting a more connected AI safety ecosystem. So far, it's like you have a triad. You have like the research in academia on one side, you have the industry on another side, and then you have the weird AI governance bubble. And these are very independent, and like these people are kind of overfitting on what they do locally. And I think overall, this leads to pretty bad decisions on this general strategy of how AI is being created, built, and deployed. I'm saying that because I was in Brussels a few months ago before they released the code of practice. And I had low expectations, and it was met with an even lower constat of what was happening. Like the average age of the person working on the Code of Practice and the AI Act is probably above 50 years old. And these people, they had to have a briefing on what an LLM is before they vote on what the AI Act should be. So I'm very enthusiastic, and I would like to see more intersection of like more technical people going into governance, or people with more like broad backgrounds and not building AI instead of your average out-of-touch San Francisco tech bros. And I think having a more diverse ecosystem and well-connected could be a net positive thing to happen.
Do you think there's something that we could do to make this happen, to interconnect the ecosystem better than today? Like in the next 10 years, what can we do to achieve that manifestation?
I mean, what we're doing here today is like a good start, having a more interdisciplinary discussion and not just having stuff happening in closed clusters separately. But yeah, probably lots of other stuff. This is the first one that comes to mind.
And for me, maybe I'm manifesting a more competitive Europe in the startup world, in tech, in AI. And I mean, I really like what's happening in Switzerland, in Zurich, in Paris, in Stockholm, Helsinki. So I feel there is something, and I hope to continue that. I don't know if my manifesting will work. But so that will be really cool that kind of founders in Europe want to stay here because they feel, not because they are, want to contribute to Europe, but because they know that Europe is the best place to be successful. And yeah, I hope we can reach that future. Yeah.
What do you think we should do to make that happen?
I think believe a lot more in founders, because, for example, in San Francisco, it's like here, if you want to raise funding, even like a little bit, you already maybe need some LOIs, you need some customers, and okay, then you just know your friends that are in SF. They just go to a house, a kind of gathering. You talk to a guy, you're like, here. I hear take 50K, take 200K. And then they go build something, and then they're just so much faster, right? While here, people are just still talking at events, trying to find an angel investor.
Yeah, so obviously SF is another story, but I think informal networks for sure are a big thing.
Yes.
And we can sort it out.
Yeah.
That is true. Any manifestation from Stefan and Angeline?
Maybe from my side, I really hope to see a lot more young founders also on the product side to challenge some of the existing players in the markets. This is like one in a generation maybe opportunity now where there is a lot up for grabs. I think a lot of industries, there's now an opportunity that hasn't existed in the last 15 years or so at the very least, where people are now ready in the market for new solutions, and where it's very hard also, it can be very hard also for existing companies to transform themselves. It's very hard to go against your own business model. So that's a huge opportunity for young and new founders to start disrupting and build new companies. So I'm really hoping to see that.
This is the moment in the club where they turn on the lights and everybody needs to go. It's too late. Angeline, would you like to add something on your manifestation?
Maybe less from an entrepreneurship perspective, but I do think that, especially with the current globally geopolitical, slightly messy situation, I think there is an interesting opportunity for Switzerland and Europe in general. Because in Switzerland, we educate a lot of talent at ETH and EPFL, but then a lot of people leave afterwards. So I think there is an opportunity. Either they start building something right away, or they stay here, they work in big tech for a while. I think there's an opportunity to kind of keep learning more in Switzerland and developing these frontier LLMs in Switzerland as well. So I think that's going to be very interesting going forward.
Do you have any piece of advice that you would give to the generation coming after us?
Learn how an LLM works before using it.
I think just don't be afraid to challenge what's out there on the market today. I remember when we started like 4 years ago to build this, a lot of people were saying, oh, you can't automate accounting with AI. Everybody thought that's just, you're nuts, right? But we eventually thought, eventually it's going to catch up and work, and here we are.
Any switch in mindset that you would hope comes with the next generation, Agatha?
I was thinking of the advice.
Okay, go ahead with the advice.
Yeah, it's similar to what Angeline said, but get educated. Like, if you don't learn how to use AI properly, you will be eventually left behind. That's it.
Yeah, and my advice would be that, there is so much opportunity, and just if you go out there and maybe build in public, post online, or network, there's so much more than maybe the traditional, high school, university, masters, PhD, and there's just one tweet away sometimes from just changing your life, and I think that's really cool, and it's a bit of manifestation and just that realization that you can just go and do things. And I would love to see more people have that, yeah.
Hopefully that is a take-home message for people in the audience. Is there any question popping up from this last discussion? Anything? Yes? Round zero. I would like to take a moment to thank the Starties because they've done a great job in this event. Thank you so much, guys.
So Agatha, you were mentioning that as advice, you would say to the people that they should get educated on AI, right? And that's also a point that you mentioned before, that we are like in an AI bubble because the average user maybe doesn't use it as much as the people that is in this room, right? And one of the biggest fears with AI is that a lot of people could lose jobs, no, or cause huge unemployment. So my question to all of you is, based on your expertise and your experience, how do you think we could close the gap of literacy?
To be fair, I think it takes a while. Like, I have a brother who's 7 years younger than me, and when I was in primary school, we didn't have anything related to computer use. And then 7 years later, he learned a lot of how to Google and which sources to trust, what not to do, and so on. So I think it will just take a while for the education system to catch up, but I'm pretty confident that the Swiss education system can handle this. In the meantime, I think it's maybe also to some degree on like platforms like ChatGPT to educate these users. It's currently not in their best interest because they might be using it less. But I think it is to some degree a responsibility of providers of these services.
Amazing. Then on that note, I hope we all go home with some food for thought, some positivity as well, some things to watch out, a lot to learn. So I thank you all very much for your contribution, and thank you for being here, for your time. I appreciate it so much. Thank you. There's still an apero, I think, right? Christoph is nodding.
Food.